On Marco Rubio's first international trip as the role of Secretary of State, he had toured the Central American and Caribbean countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and Dominican Republic. During his visit to the country of El Salvador, he had met with El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele. The meeting between the two leaders was productive, resulting in Bukele having offered to take in detained migrants from the United States and offered to accept criminals from the U.S., including those with U.S. citizenship, as well as a memorandum between the two countries being signed that day, signaling a high watermark in relations between the two countries. This has come at a time when relations with traditional allies such as Canada and Mexico have been called into question. Another reason beyond ideological similarities between the Trump administration and Bukele is the intertwined nature of the two economies. According to the Bank of El Salvador, trade had totaled between the two countries at $6.8 billion in 2023 alone. El Salvador exports products such as corn, soy, cotton, and fuel products, among other goods. The U.S. imports from the country apparel, electronic capacitors, coffee, and sugar. The U.S. has maintained a trade surplus with El Salvador amounting to $2.2 billion. The trade surplus is important to the Trump administration as it has made focusing on reviving American manufacturing jobs as an integral part of the administration's economic policy. Remittances from Salvadorans working in the United States has totaled $8.2 billion in the year 2023. This has made remittances a critical component of the El Salvadoran economy, taking up 24.1% of the nation's GDP of just $34 billion. As well, over 130 U.S. companies either possesses permanent commercial presence in El Salvador or work through representative offices in the country, helping to provide jobs to thousands in the country and provide investments. El Salvador is a part of CAFTA-DR, that is an acronym for Central American Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement. This agreement has led to the facilitation of trade investment and has helped integrate the region among the numerous countries, including between El Salvador and the U.S. The Trump administration has placed a 10% tariff on El Salvador. It still may negatively affect the economy of El Salvador, and the tariffs on certain goods that the country exports, such as aluminum and steel, will be even higher, negatively affecting those industries. Marco Rubio had signed a Memorandum of Understanding concerning strategic civil nuclear cooperation to advance peaceful nuclear cooperation, abbreviated as NCMOU. This action had been done by the State Department as a quote-unquote initial step towards establishing a robust civil nuclear partnership between the United States and El Salvador with the aim of enhancing energy security, promoting mutual prosperity through expanded economic cooperation, and promoting the highest standards of nuclear safety, security, and proliferation. The NCMOU has been utilized in the past as an important diplomatic asset used by Trump's first administration that has laid foundations for strategic ties with the U.S. The two nations have agreed to cooperate to build small nuclear reactors and establish regulatory training. The country has set a goal to train 400 nuclear specialists by the year 2030. El Salvador has set a goal of 26% of electricity supplied in the nation to be sourced from nuclear energy. This has set this goal to diversify its sources of energy and to decrease its reliance on having to import oil into the country. They have set this goal to diversify its sources of energy and to decrease its reliance on having to import oil into the country, especially with a growth in demand for electricity growing at 5%. Nuclear energy can help meet the demands for the growing nation's energy needs. The U.S. supporting the Salvadoran economy and infrastructure has worked to counter the influence of China in the region that has been growing in the region in recent years. The Trump administration, including Rubio, are China hawks and are keen at curbing the growth of China. This has come at a time when China has actively funded and built numerous projects across the nation as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. Along with trying to curb the growth of China in the region, the Trump administration has been trying to counter leftist influence in the wider region by supporting popular right-wing politicians such as Bukele to try and support the right-wing movement in Latin America, especially as countries with leftist leaders such as Colombia and Mexico have seen a weakening in the strength of ties with the United States under the Trump administration. Bukele offered to house criminals in his country's prisons, including individuals with U.S. citizenship, in exchange for a small fee. This would have been important for El Salvador because running the prison system in the country is expensive and it would have been an extra source of income for the country. The US would have saved money as well since El Salvador has a significantly lower cost of living than in the US, so lower costs to maintain prisons. The offer wasn't taken due to it not being legal for the US to send its own citizens overseas. However, the Trump administration still had appreciated the offer even though the offer was not realistically able to be implemented. A controversial part of the relationship between San Salvador and Washington, D.C. is the cooperation between El Salvador and United States over immigration. Bukele has agreed to take back MS-13 gangsters located in the U.S. and gang members from the Tren de Aragua gang from Venezuela. The president has also offered to house migrants in his country from different nationalities, including those who don't originate from his country. The plan Bukele has described would put undocumented migrants in the country's prison system. This would be a win for the Trump administration, allowing the Trump administration to accelerate the removal of undocumented people from the U.S., as well as help with the logistical quagmire of deporting over 13 million people. In total, state, county, and federal prisons can only house 1.9 million inmates. Although there are other methods for detaining individuals, such as ICE's Alternative for Detention program, it would still cost, for example, $5.07 per individual per day for electronic surveillance. If the White House desires to build detention facilities, it would cost $35,910,000 to build a 500-bed facility with $47,950,000 per year to maintain and keep operational. Although El Salvador does not contain nearly enough space to house even a fraction of the 13 million migrants in the U.S., the nation's prisons are a lower-cost alternative to housing some of the undocumented migrants in the United States. However, there are drawbacks, such as the average ICE removal flight costs close to $17,000 per flight hour, with a high volume of flights being needed between the two countries to facilitate the transfer of migrants. The total cost would hold a hefty price tag. In March of 2025, the Trump administration had deported who they claimed were 238 members of Tren de Aragua and 23 members of gang MS-13. The day before the deportation, the President of the U.S. had invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act for deporting the migrants. This was in exchange for paying $6 million to El Salvador. However, this has been mired in controversy as many individuals had not had a criminal history, and ICE had used questionable evidence for choosing the individual to be deported to El Salvador. Adding to this, there has been a resident from Maryland with granted protection from deportation that was arrested and deported. In conclusion, it is highly likely that the relationship between the two countries remain positive and cooperative for the foreseeable future as long as Trump and Bukele remain head of state in their respective countries.